So you want to learn how to pilot crew formations. Well, in this video, we've got things to think about. If we want to learn how to pilot, we're going to talk about the safety aspect of being a pilot, how to wing load your formations, how to engineer the formations. We're going to have video examples of how to pick up grips, how not to pick up grips. So we've got good examples of piloting and some poor examples of piloting, how we could have done it better. So here we go. First and foremost, the pilot is responsible for the safety of the entire group. The pilot needs to land everyone in the clear area, preferably the airport, but doesn't necessarily mean it. If something happens with the wrap or something, maybe we need to get everybody into a field. Pilots should know about other loads, planes on the drop zone. Like, is there going to be free fallers while we're going to be in the air? We don't want any meat missiles going through our canopies. Pilot needs to know the wing loading and engineering of the formation. Need to keep all jumpers on your load clear of clouds. It is your responsibility, the pilot, to make sure nobody goes through clouds. And if needed, to set up a wall. If aircraft timing can't be accomplished, then we set up a wall to make sure we have free fallers on one side, crew on another. So what do we mean by setting up a wall? So one of the most famous drop zones, Paris, California, has a standard wall that they set up. And so that way they can keep running 3 otters at a time or 3 planes at a time or whatever. And they don't have to worry about free fallers going through canopies. And so what they do is they tell all the crew to be west of Getz Road. And so that's our crew area over there. We can't cross Getz Road until we're down to 2,000 feet. So we know we're going to be below the free fallers if they do happen to open at the same time that we're in the air. And they keep all the free fall over on the main side area right over the landing area. That's a wall. Here is the portion of Regulation 105.17, the cloud clearance requirements that pertains to being a crew pilot. It says no person may conduct a parachute operation into or through a cloud within 500 feet below, 1,000 feet above, or the more difficult one that we struggle with is the 2,000-foot horizontal. So we need to be half a mile distant. So basically we need 1 mile between clouds that we can actually bring our crew formations through legally. And why is that? Well, think about aircrafts, regular general aviation, most single engine planes are flying 100, 120 miles an hour. That means they cover a mile in 30 seconds, or the 2,000 feet horizontal, they're going to cover that in about 15 seconds. And the speed limit below 10,000 feet, if you're not aware, 200, normally the planes, they need to be below 250 knots. And so that means in 7 seconds after they pop through a cloud, if they see you, then they'd have time to divert, which isn't much. So when we think about this cloud clearance requirement, it's not just for our personal safety, but with aircraft as well. And so if they're flying on an IFR flight plan, they may not even be looking out their windshield and they pop out of a cloud. If they do see you, they don't have that much time. And so that's the logic behind it. It's not because they don't want us having fun playing with the clouds. It's to make sure airplanes don't pop out of a cloud and all of a sudden, boom, there's a crew formation. A crew pilot will want to be able to wing load their formation, not only so it's healthy for everybody, but for yourself as well. So typically on these casual crew and all the world record stuff that we do, we tell everybody we need to wing load 1.30 to 1.35. That's the event range. Well, the reality is the pilot normally needs to be slightly less than that. So we normally shoot for the pilot at that wing loading range. Usually we want the pilot to be somewhere between 1.27 and 1.29. And then we take the wings and some of the lockups to be 1.30 to 1.33, and then we'll stick the heavier people on the center lines, number 4, number 9, number 16. So when they come in at 1.34, 1.35, that's where we stick the heavier people on there. And it really doesn't matter. We can shift it. We could do a 1.0 to 1.5 wing loading. And again, the pilots would be slightly less. The wings would be on the bottom half, and then your center lines would be on the upper half of that. So it transfers over. So for engineering the formations, we found that the bigger canopies on top, smaller ones on the bottom. Larger canopies, wing loaded exactly the same as a smaller canopy, have just a slightly better glide ratio. Very small, but it is very noticeable. We've noticed it when we've tried to do it in reverse, where you put the small canopies up top and the big ones on the bottom. It doesn't work as well. Having the big canopies on top and the small ones on the bottom help push that formation, so the upper canopies are trying to float a little bit more and the smaller canopies are trying to go down. And so in this example, it shows if I was a pilot with a 160, the best scenario would be to go down a size and have 143 wings on there on my row 2s, and then lock it up with a 126. That would be the best scenario to keep it safe for everyone. The next best scenario would be the same if I had the 160 canopy up on top with 143 row 2 wings on there. I could also put a 143 on the bottom. It would be safe also, but just the smaller canopy, 126 or a 113 on the very, very bottom, kind of pinches those two 143 bodies together, and so it puts just a slight tilt on those 143 canopies, and again wants to make it all fly away from the center, and just makes it so it's even more safe. But putting 143 down there won't have any problems as long as everybody's wing loaded properly. Now we could also have all 4 canopies wing loaded the same for casual crew, or especially if we were going to do a team. If we're going to be a serious competition team, having all canopies the same size is super, super beneficial, especially if we're doing 4-way sequential, 4-way rotations. Just makes it so much better where you can put anybody in any slot. 4-way sequential, you're building different formations, not just diamonds on there, and so really, really makes it nice having everybody wing loaded exactly the same and same size canopy. That's for competition. So in this case, if we're doing casual crew, we could just make sure the pilot's a little lighter, wings are in the middle, and then number 4 would be just a little bit heavier. That would be fine for casual crew, or like I said, we could all be wing loaded exactly the same size canopies. That would work as well. Not for the beginner pilots, but after we get some good piloting experience and we know we can handle those wings effectively, and we don't have to worry about the balance and all that, we tend to be able to go down one size from those row 2 wings. So in this example, it says I could be a pilot with a 143 canopy, and I could have my wings one size bigger on 160s, as this example shows. So we could certainly do that. We do that on many of the big ways. We do it effectively, but then the wing loading becomes even more super critical. I can't have those 160s. They have to be in the proper wing loading in order to make this work. One of the most important skills a crew pilot will need to make sure we do is spotting. So we need to know on a no-wind day, our canopies wing loaded at 1.3 travel about 4 miles from 13,000 feet down to about 1,000 feet. And so we just need to know if it was a perfectly no-wind day, I could get out 4 miles away and still make it back to the airport. More than likely, we're going to have wind, and so we need to know our lightning canopies traveling about 27 miles an hour through the air, and so we can kind of use the average wind speed if we want. And so if the average wind speed was 13 to 14 miles an hour, or half of that, so instead of going 4 miles like we did on that no wind day, we would travel about 2 miles. And so we kind of need to look at, if we're doing run backs, what we're going to be doing. If we're going to do any kind of like two-way, we may be doing turns and stuff, but this is for doing casual crew, or maybe we're building once or twice and heading on there, wing loaded 1.3. And some days we might have higher winds, and so in this example here that I found, so from 12,000 feet down to 7,000 feet, I'm going to be averaging about a 5 miles an hour backwards speed. So I'll be moving backwards at 5 miles an hour from 12,000 down to 7,000 feet. Now, it only comes out to about a tenth of a mile or so. So it's not a big drop, but we do need to realize that we are going to be backing up. And then at 6,000 feet, I'm going to hold steady right there at 27 knots. And then at 5,000, I'm going to start to move forward a little bit, and on through 4,000 and 3,000 feet, I'll start making some forward progress there down to our break off. So we just need to look at the winds and see the different directions and everything. And in these cases, the wind was always going the same direction. So we need to look to see if there's crosswinds. Need to look, again, if we're doing run backs, we need to look at the entire picture there when we're spotting. And certainly we could do a dozen examples on spotting on this, but we're just briefly going to touch it. This is all we're going to talk about it on this part here. We could probably have a whole seminar on spotting, of course, but that's all we're going to be talking about spotting for now. Loading and exiting the aircraft. So it's always best if crew goes last out of the aircraft. That way we don't get any meat missiles coming through. That way you're sure that aircraft has all the free fallers out. Too many times we've tried to get out just before them because the winds are light or whatever, and certainly they don't get everybody out of there, or they've got an AFF on there that just takes too long, and so they have to do a go around, and then we've got the potential of having free fallers go through there. So it's just always best if we don't do that. If we're not going to full altitude, it's best not to go above 8,000 feet. So that way it gives time for the plane to climb up to its full altitude, and it gets us below about 2,000 feet before the free fallers start to exit. And one of the super critical things of the crew pilot is to make sure that they hold the heading. Most of the time we'll be holding it towards the airport or whatnot. But in order to do that, sometimes the airport's right below us, or maybe it's even behind us. The best thing to do is look about 5 to 8 miles away, and we could find a lake, or we could find a building, or maybe we can find a road intersection, railroad intersection, or maybe some different colored field or something. But it should be about 5 to 8 miles away so that we can keep holding that heading. And so we'll pick that as soon as we get out of the aircraft. That way we know we're on the heading, and after we pick up number 2 or number 3, we can look at that point, make sure we're still heading towards that same position that we've picked out. A little more on heading here. We should always try to keep the heading and account for any crosswind if we do go off heading. So it's possible the wind may be 2 different directions, and so we just need to make sure that we always keep track of the winds at all altitudes before we get going. We may also need to change the heading due to clouds. We may need to change the heading if there's other crew groups in the air or any other canopies in the air. We may need to temporarily adjust picking up number 2, number 3 if we have brand new number 2, number 3 wings there. But if we do that, we need to make sure we get back onto that wind line. And we may need to turn slightly if we have poor wing doctors. If I got a brand new person that wants to try a row 3 wing, I'll usually put a slow little turn on the first time when they dock on there, just to give them a little advantage to make sure we don't have a wrap. A crew formation is like a teeter-totter. We have to keep this balanced. We can't have it heavy on one side, light on the other. Just makes the whole formation want to turn. If a canopy tilts to one side, what's it want to do? It wants to turn. So we need to keep this thing balanced on both sides to keep it healthy. We need to communicate the tensions. Communicate Don't let it get heavy on one side and not say anything. Let them know they need to lighten up, lighten up, lighten up. And again, we always use positive commands. Try to keep your hips square while taking the grips. That will help keep this teeter-totter nice and balanced there. And we should try not to bend over to pick up grips. Now, sometimes we need to bend over to pick up the grip, and if so, we need to use that opposite toggle to keep our teeter-totter in balance. One of the hardest things to learn as a crew pilot is patience. Patience is such a great attribute. We want to help them so bad. We want to bend over and grab that canopy, but if we bend over, what are we doing? We're putting a harness turn in there. And so sometimes patience is the best tool that we have as a crew pilot. If possible, just make them fly to your shoulder, and so you don't have to bend over. That's what we've been trying to train everybody to do. Fly to the shoulder so you don't have to bend over. Maybe it's not possible with a pup, but that's what everybody should be striving to do anyways, dock on the shoulder. And then always try to grab the line and not the canopy. Remember, the goal in crew is to never touch fabric. And so if we're always just aim to grab the line and not the canopy, that also helps us not to bend over. Your brake settings. What we found is normally it's best to fly a quarter brakes or whatever it takes to fly the formation safe for a four-way. So while we're picking up number 2, number 3, quarter brake seems to work the best. Sometimes to help out number 4, I may go to half brakes or even 3/4 brakes to slow the formation down so they can catch that wedge. Makes it a little easier for number 4. And then less brakes for the 9-way. Sometimes I'll cheat all the way out and try not to have any so those row 3 wings won't want to come around. Or less brakes, maybe an 1/8 brakes. And then after a 9-way, we try to achieve full flight on up after that. We'll fly less brakes if the pilot is slower than the formation, maybe even rear risers. Not advised for newer ones, but I've used rear risers on occasion. The pilot's brake line toggle attachment should have slack before engaging the tail. I like to pull at least 3 inches or 4 inches before my brake toggle starts engaging on there. And so that way I have a little bit of room, and so just in case I don't put my hand all the way up, or I just know for sure that I can achieve full flight. Maybe my toggle got twisted up, I got some line twists on there, but just make sure that I can get full flight and I can keep the formation safe. May need to slow the formation down for number 4, I already mentioned that. And then another sense we can build up here is listening to the wind in your ears. And so while you're flying, start to listen to how much wind is going by, and then sometimes all of a sudden you'll hear less wind and you'll realize something's going on. Maybe you've pulled extra brakes or something, but start building in that sense so you know how fast that formation is flying just by listening to the wind. So the reason why we want to cheat out of the brakes or not fly brakes once these formations get larger than a 9-way is when this formation leans over, it starts to fly faster. And so although you would think formation leaning over, it might go towards the ground faster, but as we get more wind over the top of that canopy, it also creates lift. And so this thing will lean over, start moving faster through the air, but that also generates lift that counters so you don't go down towards the ground any faster. So it actually, the descent rate stays the same, but the airspeed increases. And so that's what creates this healthy formation. And that's why we want to try to cheat out as much brakes and not stand this formation up. If we stand it up, it slows the formation down. Here are some guidelines to help pick up those grips. Number 1, keep your hips level with the horizon. I don't want to lean, if at all possible, and start a harness turn. Number 2, try for the line and not the canopy. Remember, the goal is to never touch fabric in crew. I need to get my foot in the line, and grabbing the canopy doesn't help. Number 3, do not hard point the canopy or line that I grab. Let it slide up and down. Don't transfer that energy into you. Number 4, get your foot in the line ASAP, which helps, number 5, get your hands back into the controls ASAP so that you can keep control of your formation. Here's an example of me catching a grip. Here comes the canopy in. My arm reaches out. I grab the line just below the canopy. You can see how I grab the line. My hand slides down the line. I didn't try to force or hard point the canopy. My foot goes into the line quickly. Now my hand's out of the line already, and then my hand goes back up into my controls. One of the goals as a pilot is we should always try to keep our hips level with the horizon, level with the canopy. We shouldn't try to ever bend over in our harness there, because then that starts a turn. And so we can see here that right now, the hips are even with the canopy there, level with the horizon. We don't have any forces coming in. And when this person comes in, look at how we can keep our body just perfectly straight up and down. And we don't put any harness turn into it whatsoever. And then as opposed to, watch this, when we pick up number 3, we kind of lean over just a little bit. Look how that canopy starts to lean into it. It's not always possible. Maybe we've got a new student or maybe somebody who just wants to put it way down in your foot that you may have to bend over to pick that canopy up. And if we do bend over to pick up that canopy, we need to balance. And how we balance is we use the outside brake toggle. So here we got a guy coming in. We had to bend over and look at the body, how it's leaning over to the left. And then watch the right brake here, opposite. And he's using that to balance himself. Okay, this is a big teeter-totter. And that's how we balance ourselves. Here's another example. Watch him come in, grabs the canopy, puts his foot in, and did you see the right toggle? He was using the right toggle to keep his balance on there. And when we do need to bend over, symmetry will fix everything. So here you can see we lean to the right, and all we need to do is keep back to quarter brakes, both of them. We don't want to try to fight it, try to steer, try to fix it. It never works. Symmetry just fixes it. Look at how we, in this example, just keep our hands nice and even, and this pendulum just comes to a stop on the bottom. But we've got to have the pilot up top be the stable base for us. And so again, we have a little problem, and all we got to do is go back to quarter brakes. And no matter how bad, look at the left canopy pop, but we just keep symmetry, and bam, it just stabilizes out again. Here's some more examples of watching the pilots picking up grips here. How they pick up a grip. Symmetry is always best. If we can grab the line, get our foot in like that right there, hands back in the controls, that's what we need to do. Look at that. Hand on the line, foot in the line. Bam, our hands are right back up into the controls to keep this top down nice and stable. Another example, look at the footwork, hands back up in the toggles, back in the quarter brakes. Here's an example of how to turn a formation. We want to use our body as much as possible, and we want to get the whole formation turning. So the best way is to use your body, if at all possible, not so much the toggles, but we want to move as a unit. So in this example, you can see how we start and we stop the formation all as a unit. We got to do it nice and slow. When in doubt, go too slow. It's much, much better than going too fast and wrapping yourself. When training new pilots, or if I want to start being a pilot, we should always start with just simple two ways. You could have a person, even after a Big-Way event that we're doing, you could break off and do a two-way where they just simply do a wing dock, redock, redock in place. So you get used to taking that, and make sure you take your hand out of your toggle and you're grabbing it, so we can work on this balance doing that. Then work up to 3-ways, and when we do the piloting camps, we normally have average person is number 2. Not so good to do a pup, then you're wasting a lot of your time and the pup's time because they're not used to the pilot. And then have a very experienced person as 3-way that can sit there and really mess with you and get into your brake lines and do all these things. They can put docks out in front, behind, over there, so you get used to picking up all these trashy docks. It's super critical to have video behind you, a stationary video, and it needs to be somebody on a crew canopy or really compatible so they're not zooming back and forth. So you can really focus on your heading. If you don't have video, you can certainly look at your heading after each dock, make sure you're still heading the same direction. But if you can get video, that really helps speed up the learning process. As a new pilot, should always focus on only one grip at a time. So if number 3's there messing with you, tickling your other ear over there like they're ready to dock, but just filter that out and work on your number 2. Get your foot in there, get your hands back up into your controls, get stable, then go over and get number 3. Make sure you're ready for them to get into your brake lines. They'll get up in your brake lines. Make sure you're ready for canopies that are out in front of you. Make sure that you're ready for that burble, that bad air that if they do get in front of you. And always keep your head on a swivel. Be looking around. When we're training new pilots as number 3, anytime they're not looking at me, I intentionally go over and run into their canopy, run into their brake lines, do something to mess with them so they're keeping their head on a swivel. You never know when these, especially newer people, are going to get in front of you or come at you, and you need to divert. Yeah, as I just mentioned, it's always best with a super experienced number 3. An experienced number 3 should always be trying to distract the new pilot. Anytime he's not looking at you, make sure you run into him. Tell the new pilot that you're going to be there to distract them. You're going to be tickling their ear while they're picking up number 2 on the other side, and they need to learn to filter that out. An experienced number 3 should always try to place their docks. Put them slightly behind the pilot. Try to make them reach back. Put them slightly out in front. Try to put your beeline on there so they have to reach out in front to grab that line. Let them make that decision if they should do it, shouldn't do it, or if they do it, how to do it properly. Set them 1 foot away, just like we tell the students. Make them reach. Place it high above the slider. Sometimes get into their brake lines, of course, but move it up high. Let them grab halfway down between the connector link and the canopy. Get their foot in there. Get their hands back on. Learn to protect that toggle if it's not a nubless toggle. If it's low on their foot, force them to bend over. Now, we always tell the students not to put it there, but students are going to put it there. Old people who can't learn are going to put it there. In other words, give them every known scenario to dock that they're going to get from that student. If there is a wrap, we need to hold on to those good canopies if at all possible. Anytime we can keep a diamond, we want to keep the diamond. If the wrap is below the 4-way diamond, row 3 or whatever, we want to try to keep that 4-way, etc., etc. Try to hold on to the good canopies. And then if there is a wrap and it gets extremely heavy on the one side, we need to let that energy take you. We need to ride the bull. This example shows me riding the bull. As you can see from this first clip here, the left side had a wrap and it got extremely, extremely heavy. And so if you look at the attitude of my canopy and row 2, row 3 below me, you can see how it's started this horrendous turn to the left because we have so much weight on the bottom. So let's back up and see how we got there. We want to watch this white canopy coming from the left and see how they dock. So here we have on the left side this white canopy coming in to dock. And you can see just as he's docking, we got all 4 rows are parallel up there. Look at the horizon. Everything's lined up. Everything's good. So if he would have just docked perfect, everything would have been fine. Instead, he lets it go, and now we've got the formation heavily weighted to the left. And notice how we're keeping all the rows all aligned with each other. And so what we're doing is we're trying to keep the rest of the canopies from going around. We got the one that already went around, and now we're trying to save the formation. The formation continues to turn to the left because of the extra weight, and had number 4 not have dropped the one side, we're not sure why, that's a whole topic for a different discussion. You could have seen every canopy would have been parallel here, except for mine. I'm slowly starting to resist. And when I say slowly, you can say maybe 10% of the force, or maybe better would be, how fast would you turn a large formation? And so that's what you want to think about, how much resistance. Just like if you were just going to turn a large formation back to the drop zone or whatever, how fast would you do that? And that's how much resistance you should be giving to this bull. You can see as this continues, people start dropping grips, break it down. But you see, we still have our original 3-way stair step where we're holding on to the bad canopy, and no other canopies ever wanted to go around. So had we have attempted to immediately steer back onto course instead of riding the bull, we would have had that right side would have got high. What happens when the right side of our wing is higher? It wants to turn left, and so it would have turned left in the formation. We would have had multiple cutaways. In this example, we have a miscommunication. I had been talking about riding the bull and the tensions and everything. And one thing we need to make sure we understand is we need to hold that heading. When we ride the bull because there's just so much tension that the entire formation starts to turn, not because of what the pilot's doing, but because of what's going on inside the formation. So here you can see at this point right now, we've got all the canopies level to the horizon, pilots level to the horizon, and all's right. So the difference here is this is just simple wing maintenance versus when we ride the bull because there's a wrap or something. In a situation that if you were a catcher, you would throw that, or release that canopy. And here it's just wing maintenance where it's just simply getting heavy on one side, and that's when we need to resist. If we just give in, then the people don't really know that they're too light, too heavy, or whatnot. And so we need to be communicating the tensions down, and we need to, in this case, hold the heading is the most important thing. And here you can see in this freeze frame where it's heavy on the left side, which is actually what's causing the right side to come up. So if we look at the pilot's foot, you can see the lines starting to come up on the pilot's foot. And then you can also see the pilot's canopy is turning towards the right, sort of going into a downplane type situation where the tension is so heavy on the left, and that's where the center of the gravity is, so it forces that canopy over to the right. We can watch here as the weight transfers from the left over to the right, back to the left, and each time that canopy will want to dive towards the weighted side, and in this case we just didn't hold the heading and we allowed the formation to turn us. And so because there wasn't an abrupt weight that was added to it, in this case we should have just held the heading and let the group fix it instead of riding the bull. So this is not the time to ride the bull. We only ride the bull when it gets to be super, super abrupt and it's imminent that somebody's going to come around. In this case, it's just simple wing maintenance or lack thereof. In this video example, we've got row 5 wings coming on. You can see The left row 5 wing is already on there. The right row 5 wing is trying to get on, and the reality is if the lockups would have been in the same zip code, things would have been different altogether. But let's watch how the pilot handles this. As the right row 3 wing comes on, the orange and black canopy, I want to go ahead and just pause this and show up to this point everything is symmetrical. You can see that the tensions on the feet on row 3, it looks very symmetrical. The pilot is nice and square on top. Everything looks great. And here comes the right row 5 wing. Bam, a lot of down energy there. We caught it one cell in, and we just put a lot of weight on that side of the formation. Now, take a look over on the left-hand side of the formation at how light it got. All those canopies are floating up on the feet. Okay, now we're going to start to see the teeter-totter effect here. So it gets light on one side and heavy on the other and back and forth. And so here we're pausing, and you can see over on the left side, now it's a little bit heavy. You can see all the canopies are down on the left feet on the left side. And then look at on the right side, how it's extremely light. Over on the right side, you can see all the canopies coming up on the right. You can see here how the formation's starting to lean towards the right more and more. And then here's where the pilot makes a mistake, where we start thinking of heading more. Look at how all the rows here, row 2, 3, 4, they're all parallel to each other except for the pilot is trying to get it back on heading. And again, we can get it back on heading, but we need to take our time. And this is just too fast of a correction. And so the left side is just going to start to come around. And then you can see how rows 3 and 4 just get pushed in. Not much they can do when the whole formation's turning at you. And so they just went around. And here's another example of when it's appropriate to ride the bull. So first of all, we want to look over here. Row 4 wing reached over with his left hand, grabbed onto the beeline, and he pulled excessive beeline. Now look at how he's sunk down on the foot there, and the row 3 wing also. You can see how much lighter they look at the feet. If I would have looked across, I would be looking at the waist of the guy. So we're definitely pulling way too much beeline on that. So now we watch as the lockups come on. The left lockup came on nice and soft. And then the right lockup came just a little bit extra heavy right there. And we still have too much beeline over there. So now we've weighted that side of the formation. You can see way up on top, the pilot canopy is actually leaning over to the left, but look at that row 4 down there. We're definitely still too heavy on the right side, but look at how much compared to the horizon that pilot canopy is leaning to the left. All right, and so a few seconds later, we're going to take a snapshot, and then another 3 seconds later, we're going to take a snapshot. And when we compare these two to the side, look at that, how it's 12 degrees it changed from the horizon just in a matter of 3 seconds. And so this is when we got to ride the bull, and we've just got to let that thing take us for a little bit. We can only resist the same amount that we would actually turn a big formation. So over 30 seconds of heavy on this side, and nobody tried to fix it. The whole right side was heavy over there. By the time the pilot felt it up top and we could start saying get light on the right over there, this row 4 left wing was already going around. So definitely we got to keep this teeter-totter balanced, and definitely we got to call down on these calls, whether to get light or get heavy. And other piloting crew considerations, make sure you communicate tensions down to your row 2 if needed. The lower we can solve any tension problems, the better. You should be fixing it at the source. And so if they're heavy down at row 3 or whatever, you should communicate down to your row 2s, hey, get heavy, get light, and then let them also communicate that down. Be on the lookout for other crew formations, tandems, other disciplines. We need to keep our head on a swivel, make sure we're keeping our group safe away from other hazards. If you need to land off, try to pick an area that all jumpers can land at. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to land at the airport. Sure, we want to try to land at the airport, but sometimes winds, whatever, maybe we had a wrap or something, maybe it just makes sense to try to get everybody into a big open field. And then lastly, break it down or starburst early if there's turbulence or clouds. And so I'm watching where the cloud layer is when I'm climbing through altitude, and I'm kind of feeling if the plane has any bumps or anything. And if it's turbulent up to 5,000 feet, I might tell everybody in the airplane, hey, 5,000 feet is a hard deck. Or if we're coming down and we didn't feel it on the plane on the way up, and we're coming down and all of a sudden it starts to get bumpy, we may end up needing to starburst that early. Normally, we always try to hold that heading unless there's clouds. If I'm looking out and I can turn 20 degrees, 10 degrees, whatever, to avoid any kind of clouds, I definitely want to keep my cloud clearance requirements. So if I need to, I can, at the right time, maybe I've got my 4-way diamond, maybe I can quickly turn, or maybe it's a 9-way diamond before we starburst, maybe I can turn to avoid clouds. I would want to do that. If there's aircraft, maybe I'm close to a aircraft pattern or aircraft highway or something that we may need to keep our heads on a swivel looking for other aircraft. Runbacks, maybe before it's time to do a runback, maybe the wind blew us a little bit off the wind line or something. Maybe just before we do a runback, I go ahead and I change directions just before that runback. We also may need to temporarily change directions if, like, number 2's struggling, we need to help them out. Maybe I need to change directions to go get number 2 or number 3, and then I need to put it back on heading if number 2 or number 3 gets on there. If I'm with a new row number 3, where it's their first attempts at row number 3, and they did pretty good on the row 2s, but we want to try them out on row 3s, I might go ahead and put this slow turn their first time while they're trying to get onto row 3s. But always, we should always try to turn back onto that original heading, so that people that are in echelon, they don't end up being behind the formation. And then if you're in echelon, you should know that the pilot's going to turn back on there. So if we just make that a standard to where we always turn back onto the original heading, if we need to go pick up number 2, number 3, or if we're trying to help a row 3 wing or something, that everybody knows that we're just going to put it back onto that original heading. Also, every pilot has a crystal ball that we can see into the future. We can see 2 to 3 seconds into the future. How do we do that? Well, I watch the hands of the people that are coming to dock, okay? So if I'm watching the hands and they're getting ready to pull a riser or a steering toggle, I know it takes a second or 2 before the canopy starts to respond. I know it takes a little while for all that. And so I can see 2 to 3 seconds into the future what's going to happen. And so try to watch the hands of the people that are trying to come in and dock on you. And that's a good indication if they're going to do something stupid, weird, crazy, or anything like that. You have time to turn away or save yourself or whatever. As usual, the student will go low and behind. So here I'm doing some cross control to help bring it down. And again, you can only do cross control for a few feet or whatever. If they're any further than that, I would have had to have sashayed. But here comes the student. I'll grab them, put my foot in the lines, get my hands back in the controls as soon as possible. Maintaining the heading. Here comes the number 3. Again, I reach out, grab on, get my foot in the line as quickly as possible, hands back on the controls. Here's the next one. Foot in the lines, hands in the controls. Notice the heading doesn't change at all. And here it comes again. Foot in the lines, hands up, maintaining control. The plan was to do 4-way carousel dive with younger experienced people. And this is a great example of how wing loadings need to be proper. We had somebody too light and maybe they didn't have the experience or the strength to pull the front riser on the outside, but here we'll see as we come into dock, we come in with a bunch of up-down momentum, and we never planted on yelling, front riser, front riser, front riser. And you can see how just they keep coming up and going down and coming up and going down. And I should have clearly dropped them before then, but I kept yelling front riser, hoping that they would make it in there. And then here's the next attempt. After I had the white and red canopy on my right, they were just a little bit lighter. Didn't put extra front riser trim in, and you can see how they held pretty good. And the third build, you can see I go into deep cross control to help. Now you can decide if you want to help them. On their first jump, I'm always going to help them. They don't know what they're doing. You can see here, I'm just top docking the person. They were clueless as to what they needed to do, how they needed to get in there. And basically I just had to go get them. Especially when you have video, then you can go back and show them on the video, look, this is what you should have done. Otherwise you just sit there and take an air bath, and everybody takes an air bath. And so by me helping, we definitely sped up the process, and we helped the other two guys, which appear to be a little better. Again, look at the wing maintenance. Wasn't as bad as the very first one, but at least they've got their hand in the front riser and they're holding it on there. This was the configuration that went crazy on the first one, so maybe the other guy decided he wasn't going to put as much front riser. And to reiterate, here's some things to look for as a pilot. So we're asking these people to put it up shoulder to slider height, but if they get up in your brake lines, look at how this person got up in the brake lines. We need to counter with the other brake. We need symmetrics, right? And so here's the next attempt where the person got sucked in behind the body burble. We grabbed one cell off of center. There's no way we're going to be able to get this out. It's better to drop it. Now, luckily, this experienced number 3 here then puts on the brakes, which allows him to start walking out to the outside and get the proper grip on there. But had it not been an experienced person, that never would have happened. And then, even then, we end up hard pointing and losing the grip. And then here we got a decent number 2 pickup, very nice. And here comes number 3. Again, we're trying to grab the lines, never the canopy. If we can grab the lines, get our foot in there as soon as possible. In this case, we grab the top of the canopy. We're trying to get our foot in there. Remember, we need to keep this teeter-totter balanced. And as we get our hands back in there, look at how it just starts going back and forth. We still had too much weight. We didn't get symmetrics in our brakes. And again, we end up kicking them off. And that's all we have for this edition of How to Pilot on CrewTube. If you have any questions, again, please contact me. Thank you.